supervisory fish biologist for the Fish and Wildlife Service. He has been working on native fish conservation in the American Southwest and northern Mexico, and a focus of his career that's been a focus of his career for the past 30 years. He's knowledgeable in the planning, design, and implementation of complex programs for native fish and natural flow regime conservation. His knowledge base includes a healthy emphasis on river and fish ecology, the Endangered Species Act, federal water management and state water law. As a senior level biologist, he is responsible for working with a diverse cadre of cooperators, including private landowners, academicians, agency biologists, Native American tribes, lawyers, engineers, and biologists. And they represent a wide variety of folks. He has led cooperative efforts to implement recovery actions for listed fish species in most New Mexico river basins. He has had to work through the labyrinth created by the need to implement collaborative programs aimed at protecting natural resources while integrating with the varied resource use activities that initially endangered the riverine environments. He has authored or co-authored peer-reviewed publications, technical reports, reports to Congress, and popular articles. And his speaking experience includes a variety of experiences in technical and more bureaucratic environments, and they've ranged from the friendly to very hostile. And he's promised me that it's either going to be friendly or hostile, so we'll see what he comes up with. So please welcome Jim Brooks.
You know, these opportunities only come around so many times in his life. And for those of you that know me, versus those of you that don't, you'll be able to talk to each afterwards and commiserate over what were they thinking when they put this guy up here. So, but I appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody today and thinking about what I was going to talk about, the future of water. I've been a bit of a student of John Wesley Powell, especially in recent times, and there's a couple of great books, one by William DeVries from 2001 that's called Seeing Things Whole. It's like in the sense of John Wesley Powell. But, given the situation that we're in today with water and where we're going, I think revisiting some of John Wesley Powell's ideas and his history and where we go from now will be really important, because as we all know, our future, at least in some part, is determined by our past. And so it's not that you live in the past, but to get to the future, you use information from the past. So that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. John Wesley Powell was a lot of different things, but he was a leader, first and foremost. And I think that's something that we all need to strive for today to get done what we need to, whether we're dealing with fire, climate change, or even bad bureaucracy and politics. But leadership is really important. He went his own way. He proposed in the late 1870s with his Eric Land's report that he basically presented to Congress, and he was revolutionary in his water management ideas. And much of what we use today comes from him. And but he proposed a system that had checks and balances. He wasn't for public domain. He wanted to privatize that. And so there's some really interesting information in here on how Powell used the natural resources of the western U.S. But nonetheless, he prospered in this environment. He became the second director of USGS in 1881. And as part of that, for the next 7 or 8 years, he pushed and got funded a large irrigation survey project, which is basically to survey the Rocky Mountain region for irrigable lands, and all for the idea of development down the road. At the same time, you had the Homestead Act, which was giving 160 acres to every family without a lot of requirements, sort of getting in the way of this intelligent and rapid development of new resources that many people thought were unexpendable, but certainly no different now. He initiated a hydrographic survey of irrigation potential, essentially, in the Rocky Mountain region, in 1888, and in 1889, because of basically the fire sale on land, on unappropriated federal land, and through the Homestead Act, but also through the railroads became huge land speculators in the late 1800s. And they were the first into a lot of this country. They got a lot of land, and then they turned around and sold it. And in 1889, when there was railroads in the public domain, the first thing the railroads did was call their new real estate agents. That's where real estate agents were born. And they went to Congress, and they got the survey defunded in 1890, and which had profound effects on our future and essentially the watering of the West. I'll talk about in a little bit. So in the end, he resigns from USGS. He dies in 1902, the same year that things really begin to change. But in the meantime, he's a scholar. He's self-taught. He never spent a day in a classroom where he was a student, essentially. But he was one of the initial participants in the Illinois Natural History Survey. It goes on and on. He was an Indian linguist. He published a book on basically a language tree of North American, Native American linguistics that's still considered very valuable today, but and quite a philosopher. So his vision, which is best presented in this Lands of the Arid Southwest. So this is a report he presented to Congress in the late 1870s, and he published on this later on in a series of articles in 1890 in Centuries magazine, and which expounded considerably on this. But he characterized the lands, and so most of you that have paid any attention to it, he did more than just go down the river in 1869, down the Colorado River. So he looked at, he called it timber, pasturage, and irrigable lands of the arid regions, and so that's how he presents this information in his book. But he had geologists and hydrologists, Gilbert, who was really important to him in mapping a lot of the irrigation potential and even how much water was in the western U.S. And he was the one that really helped Powell to get people to think about putting the brakes on development until they knew what they had. Cubic foot per second, acre foot, those are metrics that we commonly use for different reasons in water. They came from these guys. That's where this stuff came from. And so he proposed a watershed-based approach. He's got maps whereby everything is, states would not have the straight boundaries they have now. They'd all be based on watershed. And these watersheds would be managed communally, so more of a communal type approach. And thereby being self-regulating, and he argued against massive, large-scale hydrologic development in the West because it would not allow that sort of self-policing to take place. And so when he first became the USGS director in 1881, he spent a lot of time selling his ideas, selling his vision, and he went before Congress in 1883, and this is a quote from his speech, but he told them there wasn't enough water. You don't have enough water to irrigate the land, and you're setting up a future conflict. And sure enough, that's exactly what we've seen in the system. And this was 130 years ago. So he died in 1902, and in June 1902, the Reclamation Act was passed, and Bureau of Reclamation, then called U.S. Reclamation Service, was established later that year, and authorizing legislation, and then water development in the West is off and running. The 1928 Boulder Canyon Act is what really got the big water project. Hoover Dam, for example, Coos Dam, there were, I think, 7 or 8 projects in that act that were authorized and funded. And today, what that's meant, and this is through 2009, but Reclamation has funded about 180 projects worth over $11 million. So they've been really important to the system. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about a portion of the Colorado River and then the Middle Rio Grande. So I'll talk a little bit about the Rio Grande. I'm going to talk mostly about the San Juan portion, of the Colorado River, and then I'll talk a little bit about the Middle Rio Grande, and end up with some recommendations on how we deal with the Upper Gila in New Mexico and Arizona. Colorado Compact was signed in 1922, and it apportioned basically 50 million acre-feet of water between the upper and lower basins. And part of that strategy long-term was that Meade and Powell would then hold the water toward the lower basin. And I mean, I think they felt like they would not ever be able to not meet their obligations. Well, that's not true. In 2007, a shortage sharing agreement was signed by the Secretary that coordinated operations for Meade and Powell to make sure that the lower basin got its 7.5 million acre feet of water. And so that's, I mean, those are sort of the big points of the Colorado River Compact history. More recently, just like within the last 2 months, Reclamation has released a basin supply and demand study report. And so what this does is looks at basically every alternative that's out there on how you might increase water supply or satisfy water demand. And that's a very important document right now in looking at how the Colorado River system is going to be managed in the future. The Rio Grande Compact was signed in 1938, and it involves the states of Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas, with the primary purpose being to regulate water to get from upstream to downstream. Elephant Butte, which is the biggest reservoir in the state, was built in 1916 and not envisioned, obviously, did not envision a compact at the time, but became very important for interstate deliveries, although it was built specifically to provide for irrigation in the Sea Valley around the Las Cruces, not to get water downstream. So two very different river basins. So when these compacts were established, there were no endangered fish. There was a climate change. There weren't over allocations, over appropriations of water, and so they tend to be fairly strict in their regulations. And endangered fish programs that come in after the fact and try to live within the bounds of interstate compact delivery requirements and all the legal things that deal with water use. It required a marriage of two diametrically opposing goals, essentially, because all these goals, all these programs have the same goals, basically, whether it's the Middle Rio Grande, the San Juan program, the Lower Basin program, the Upper Basin program. They protect the species, they recover the species, but they also develop water, continue to develop water, continue to support the activities that in large part threaten these other species to begin with. So you have to marry those two things, and certainly there's a lot of politics that goes into that and compromise. But nonetheless, the dual goal programs are what we hope are the best way to get to the end, which is for us all to have water to live with in the future. So I'm going to talk about the Middle Rio Grande program and the San Juan program. And the Middle Rio Grande Endangered Species Act Collaborative Program, they should win an award for the longest name of the program. Has been in existence since about 2001, 2002 here, and it's a result of a biological opinion. And the San Juan program has been around since 1992, and also in the result of actually 3 different biological opinions. And what I want to do is I'm going to focus down to one specific activity that these programs typically undertake, and that's fish stocking. So what do you do when you have an endangered fish? Well, you grow fish and you stock them. And there are all the good things and the bad things that go with captive propagation efforts, but captive propagation tends to be easily implementable, and everybody likes stocking fish. And so when you have a dual goal program and you're trying to make the politics mesh and trying to get the support you need for gaining funding and that sort of thing, then you tend to emphasize some of these actions that are a little more implementable and de-emphasize things that are a little more difficult, like water for people or water for fish, that sort of thing. So these two basins, so these are line hydrographs from USGS, and the figure on the left is a shiprock gauge, and I apologize for the scale here, but for shiprock on the San Juan River, and just a take-home message there, that's the history of flow since about 1940, and is that the flows fluctuate at shiprock quite a bit, but they're always about 300 or 400 CFS in rate. Conversely, if you look at the graph on the right, which is the Rio Grande here in Albuquerque and at the Central Avenue Bridge, actually, if you look at these flows here, these low flows, they get down close to 100 CFS. Most everything hovers around 700 or 800 CFS on the Y scale, but it's not a lot of water. And what these graphs don't show is that there is no channel intermittency in the San Juan River between Navajo Dam and Lake Powell. And with the Rio Grande, between Albuquerque and Elephant Creek Reservoir, you can have up to 100 miles of dry river. At the same time, you have these kind of flows. So it's very different situations, but they both rely heavily upon fish stocking. So the silvery minnow is the poster child on poster fish for the Middle Rio Grande. Historically, it occurred throughout the Rio Grande Basin, all the way to the Gulf, and in most of the Pecos, and now it's relegated to the small reach you see right here in New Mexico. So, but one of the things about the Rio Grande is people say the river's always gone dry. And you say it, it's just matter of fact. And every symposium I've ever been in, every meeting I've been involved in with Middle Rio Grande, on any of the hydrologic history, the assumption is the river's always gone dry, and that absolutely is not true. I want to tell you here today that is not true. It started going dry when we started diverting water, when we started logging watersheds. And it makes, and this idea that this stays around today profoundly affects us on the Rio Grande. And so we just had an op-ed piece in the Albuquerque Journal a couple of weeks ago from a woman that talked about the bosque can take care of itself. And that the fish will come back from being burrowed down into the sand. I mean, this has been around since 1996. But there's a perception out there that the river's always gone dry. And this is why it happened. And I say, point out at the bottom, there's two books there. Raining in the Rio Grande, M. Hall is probably the most famous of his co-authors, but also Sturlock's Environmental History of the Middle Rio Grande Basin are again, excellent discussion. Both of them have excellent overviews of what happened within the upper basin. And essentially what happens in the upper Rio Grande, you had the southern Colorado began to irrigate on a very large scale and essentially dewatered the Rio Grande by the time it got to the state line. At the same time, you had the railroads making incursions into the southern Rockies, building bridges, lots of trees being cut, and so the railroad construction actually resulted in a significant amount of deforestation, which then affected runoff and water retention in the slopes and that sort of thing. At the same time, you've got the southern Colorado divergence going on. You have the old acequias here. Everything in the Middle Rio Grande Valley was waterlogged. And there wouldn't be any water in the river channel, but you couldn't hardly grow any crops 200 yards away because it was waterlogged. And so in this case, there's a Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District here, for those of you that are familiar with Middle Rio Grande, and they came into existence to basically build drains to drain the farm so that people could irrigate. At the same time, the river channels were dry. So lots of dam construction, and the point is, this is a view of Sanacasi Diversion Dam. And so there are so many hydraulic plumbing artifacts put into the system that it's difficult to look at what a natural system is here, but it's even more difficult to understand how going dry naturally was historically occurred. So the Middle Rio Grande program concentrates really on silvery minnows. Like that is a big part of it, but I'm only going to talk about Rio Grande silvery minnow. And it's the normal suite of things you see in these recovery programs: water acquisition and management. But water acquisition in this case means leasing water. So you getting temporary use of water because nobody sells the water, right? What did Mark Twain say? Whiskey for drinking or water for fighting. And this is no exception here. And so there's been a lot of effort put into habitat restoration, a lot of money put into propagation and augmentation of silvery minnow. And to the tune of, from 2001 to 2009, this program spent over $120 million. And in 2 or 3 years since, since then, we're probably close to $150 million now. So with all this effort focused on silvery minnow in the river, how well is it done? And so this is a line graph. This is year here from 1993 to 2012. And this is catch being an effort metric. This is number of fish per 100 square meters. And this is a common metric used for sand bed stream. And so these are point measurements for 20 different monitoring sites. And the mean with a standard error there for all these different catch per unit effort statistics. And so here we are. So the program begins about right here in 2002. We spent a ton of money we wind up with quite a few fish early on the system, but now we press. So we're $150 million into this program, and we're worse off than when we started. And so we have to start, you look a little more closely at what we're doing, and so we're back to the easily implementable things where it's easy to grow and stock fish, but it's something else to protect water. And certainly this is the case where if you look at this line hydrogram, that right there, that period, that's almost no water in Albuquerque. And this reach is severely dewatered now because of a drinking water project that's come online. But when rivers like this, when you see low flow conditions, there's at least 50 miles of dry river down the street. So obviously, emphasis is on implementable actions, but we wind up, we're not stocking in this kind of condition, but this is what happens. We provide, we stock fish, and we stock fish in the fall, and then we allow the following summer's flows after you have reproduction. So then this is what winds up happening. You dewater these channels, and so you can spend $500,000 on growing fish and not spend any money on protecting water, and then you just put yourself into the loop and doing this year after year, and it's not so much taking the easy way out, but trying not to do enough. And so this is just a graphic that shows the effects of stocking. So the green line here is the Albuquerque breach, and so as part of an experiment, we quit stock. We stocked this river from 2002 up to 2006 in the upper end. Then we quit stocking because we wanted to know if, without stocking, if we could keep the fish in the system, and obviously we couldn't. And every year our catch rates are down lower. But look at the same, conversely, what's happening in the two lower reaches downstream below that. They're all headed to zero in spite of the fact that we stocked a ton of fish in these two lower reaches, and that is definitely an artifact of not having water in the system and focusing too much on easily implementable actions and not enough on things that are a little more meaningful. So with the Rio Grande, there's some realities here that we're really stuck with. This is a drinking water project up by Alameda Boulevard. This is a small, there's about 140,000 acre-feet of water going from San Juan into the Rio Grande Basin. And that's an old exchange. And that's supervised water for Bernalillo County and the city of Albuquerque. As part of their project, they built a fish bypass. And so we've accessed, this has got a pit tag reader in the array in the channel. And the fish use it, it's great. But they can't run this diversion all the time because they don't have enough water in the system. So on the lower end, this is down near Santa Casia. This river, as you can see here, it's within a massive forest of non-native riparian vegetation, channels entrenched. In some cases, it's even higher than the surrounding landscape, which is the case here. So this channel here is a local channel, and so that was dug to efficiently transport water in the 50s into Elton Butte Reservoir, and what it does very effectively is to dry up the river channel. What do you do in swampland? You dig a channel, right, so you can divert all the water out. And so the Rio Grande has some real big issues to deal with from the standpoint of channel intermittency and trying to keep enough water in the system. And at this point, there are so many big fixes that I think the best the Rio Grande program can hope for right now are short-term solutions. So let's turn over to the San Juan Basin and talk about it briefly. And this occurs in the northwestern corner of the state. Very typical recovery program, just like the others. It's got dual goals to conserve the populations of endangered fish, but then also to proceed with development. And with the same suite of actions that we like to see. There's more water in the San Juan River, obviously, than there is in the Rio Grande. And this is back to that shiprock stage. And still variable. And you've got the Animas River coming in, and so it has a fair amount of dynamism to it. And so the primary fish that we concern ourselves with here are Colorado pike minnow and razorback suckers, both very large, long-lived fish. And a portion of the San Juan, this is Farmington right here. So most of this project, it goes all the way to Lake Powell. The best habitat probably is in the lower end. But we've had fish passage up here, but there's efforts that are ongoing throughout this reach of the river. So a lot of stocking, as we said. There's environmental flow protection with agreement by the reclamation to reoperate Pablo Dam. There's non-native removal. We have non-native removal issues up there, and within the last 2 years, we had a relatively large habitat restoration project become implemented through Nature Conservancy. This was actually from Governor of New Mexico's River Ecosystem Restoration Initiative from about 4 or 5 years ago. They were awarded money, and so there's some really interesting things going on there. But fish stocking is what we seek to do best, and what we focus on so much. And so these are the graph on the left is pike minnow, the one on the right is razorback sucker, and this is just a view of our target stocking number for the system. And so we don't have specific habitat goals. We have habitat conditions that we pursue, but we can always come up with specific numbers on the fish we need. And so this is the result of a larval razorback survey from 1998 through 2011. And I think the point here is that the stocking is working. Stocking works in the Rio Grande, stocking works here as long as you've got fish you can put in. And in the case of razorback sucker, they're actually reproducing and producing larvae. There's no evidence of recruitment yet, but nonetheless, it's a successful effort. With pike minnow, these are photos of all the fish that were stocked at 75 millimeters bigger. And so this river, the San Juan River, is rapidly becoming almost a neck-to-neck rare fish river right now, but they're all stock fish. And with pike minnow, there's no evidence of reproduction yet. But again, it's the fish stocking side of it that we do really well. And as long as you've got water, you've got fish. Well, this is a view, this is a line graph that shows every one of those data points. Like say, if we look at this 2010 data point here, this actually covers 10 years antecedent condition. And so one of the best ways we've been able to look at community response, fish community response to flow changes or specific hydrographic events is through these accumulated data sets. And so this is a view of how much water has been coming down the San Juan. And this purple line, that you see in the middle that's the mean annual flow, annual discharge. And so this is for a period of record we've got. And but you can look here, and since the late 1990s, our flows and the cumulative amount of water that we have to deal with are decreasing significantly. And so things like fish stocking can only take us so far. And obviously we address issues regarding climate change and what the effects are, in particular runoff in the future, and none of it looks good, whether it's the fire issues that we have to talk about that Emily spoke about, or any of the consequences from the huge land changes that we're going to see. And so this is a hydrograph that shows the model that shows this is out of that basin studies report. But what this really shows, it's a little difficult to see, is that within the next 50 to 60 years, runoff at Lee's Ferry in the Colorado River is going to be a month earlier. Peak runoff is going to come a month earlier, and there's going to be a 500,000 acre-feet less in that runoff than you see now. If you look, this is so from some modeling by Dagmar from Bureau Reclamation here in Albuquerque on what projected inflows are into Elephant Butte in the next 70, 80 years. And you can see by the model of 2095, where median flows in the middle and 25 to 75% exceed these flows boundaries. And so we're looking at less water throughout the system. This is this report I was talking about, the basin study. And I encourage you to read it. You can get it online. It's readily available, and it looks at a bunch of different scenarios on how we might manage for water in the future. And it acknowledges up front that we can't meet our demands now. But it concludes with we can meet increasing demands in the future if we do this stuff. And it's theoretical. It's theoretical. And the concern that I have is that not anyone has asked the question that we're asking here today, what would John Listikow say now? And because everything he has proposed that would happen has happened, but he's also responsible for a lot of irrigation technology out there. So this is a situation where we didn't really learn any lessons. And so from the standpoint of of managing rivers in the future, right? Obviously, the questions are going to be critical. Old literature, Powell, their land report, Robert Rush Miller in 1961, and W.L. Minkley and Jim Deacon in 68 wrote a couple of papers on endangered fish in the desert Southwest that are well worth reading and considering. And and then there's another effort. Daniel Sarowitz at Arizona State University, and he's got a paper out. He's got several books out on science and uncertainty and environmental controversies. And what he basically says is that if you can't sit down at the table to begin with and come to some common goals, how are you going to agree on what science you use? And so, especially in the middle of Rio Grande here, we're mired in a situation of you trot out your report or publication and somebody trots out theirs to counter yours. And so we have this competing science that disallows us to move forward and make decisions. And so we can give our leaders a job. We can actually make them do their job up front and help us resolve some of this, so the science side of this is far more easily attained. Thirdly, protecting natural flow regimes and not just relying upon easily implementable things or something we need to look at. And I think we have to accept that scientific certainty is okay, uncertainty is okay. Now, it's always raised to refute anything you say or to be used to say, well, you can't say that. You know, it could be something else. You don't know that a dry channel affects fish, and you can't prove that fish need water. Well, you know, and so I mean, it was on and on. But that's the quandary we're in now. And so scientific uncertainty is okay. You just have to have leaders that can push it forward more. And by and large, it's simple. Water conservation is basic to it all. So this is where taking this to the upper Gila. So we've done what we've done on the Rio Grande, we've done what we've done on the San Juan, but the Gila provides a different opportunity. So you have the Arizona Water Supply, which is all part of the larger water development that originates with the Central Arizona Project and so forth and backs up into New Mexico. And this AWSA allows for the development of water use in the upper end. This is an opportunity to do the right thing with the river. The Gila, upstream of Safford, it's the longest undammed river we've got in this part of the country now. And so it's something to consider. There's native species are abundant, they're strong, there's local uses, there are local diversions, custom and culture that can be honored. This is a recipe for doing the right thing and taking the lessons learned and employing it. And so, you know, with that, I guess I would pose to you, what would John Wesley Powell say today? You know, I think that's for each of us to decide. I have all kinds of stuff I was going to put up here. So I decided I would put fish needs water. But anyway, what I hope is that by trying to bring Powell back into the discussion, I mean, it should make people think. And in the end, all of us can do everything that we can do, and we can look at some of the old literature, but if we don't have leaders, if we don't have leadership in our agencies that are willing to stand up straight, even when there's a whisper of politics, we're going to be in trouble in the future. And there are solutions that can be had, and I think if we could get some like John Powell, we'd be in better shape. Thank you.